You trudge through the shadows of an overwhelming landscape. There's no path, only dust and dreams that seem far out of reach. The world's eyes are elsewhere, on everyone but you. The military was supposed to be an answer, a promise of purpose, an escape from the mundane. But now here you are, long after the dust of battle has settled, still invisible to the very people who should have supported you. They bark at your dreams. You can hear them clearly, though it's not from some military commander. No, it's from a world that has moved on, a world that doesn't understand, or worse, refuses to acknowledge your sacrifices. You remember the look in their eyes when you first said you wanted to enlist. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't pride. It was confusion. But why? What makes you think you belong there, they asked. It wasn't doubt. It was something worse, something dismissive. They laughed. They mocked the very idea that you could stand beside men and women who had given their lives. They thought you weren't strong enough. You weren't tough enough. It didn't matter that you'd spent hours training, pushed yourself to limits no one could fathom. You were a woman, and for them, that meant something else entirely. Fast forward to now when the dust has settled and you've returned home, but the fight is far from over. This time, you're not battling enemies on foreign soil, you're battling the silence that surrounds you. The world has moved on, it seems, and it's left you behind. You fought for freedom. You fought for others' right to dream, to be heard, and yet here you are silenced by the very system you swore to defend. You open your inbox, and there's a message from a fellow vet. They ask, "Do you ever feel like your service doesn't count?" You laugh bitterly because you both know the truth. They didn't care back then, and they don't care now. Their questions were never about you. They were about their own discomfort with what you represent. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time. Let's see where this story resonates with you. Your dreams were never meant to be buried in a box, but it feels like they've been left there. And as you close the door behind you and step into the world once more, you wonder, why are so many others like you still invisible? You can't shake the feeling that the world is looking right through you. It's as if your service has become nothing more than an afterthought in the grand narrative. You remember the first day you returned home after your deployment. It wasn't the welcoming hug you'd imagined. It wasn't the parade of gratitude and admiration. Instead, it was confusion. People didn't know how to react to you. Some avoided eye contact. Others simply nodded as if to acknowledge your presence and move on. No one seemed to understand what it really meant for a woman to return from war. The silence speaks louder than anything. You're expected to pick up where you left off, to simply resume the life that was supposed to be waiting for you when you came back. But what about the things you've seen? The weight of your experiences that now feel like they're anchored to your chest, making every step feel heavier than the last? You've tried to talk about it. You've attempted to share the emotional scars that remain, hoping that someone, anyone, would listen. But they don't. You hear the hollow responses, "It's just part of the job." You signed up for this. You'll get over it. The words are dismissive, hollow echoes that seem to minimize everything you've endured. It's as if they don't see you as a person who fought through the unimaginable. They only see a soldier who's supposed to have no feelings, no vulnerabilities. The invisible wounds are the hardest to bear. You remember the stories of your comrades, some who were never seen again, their sacrifices lost in the chaos of the battlefield, but at least they had the dignity of being acknowledged. You didn't get that luxury. You were expected to be strong, to soldier on, even when your mind and body were fractured. The worst part is, you never thought that coming home would be harder than the war itself. The veterans community, while a source of solace, has also become a reminder of how little is done to help those who return home. You read posts on social media from other female veterans, stories of women who fought for a place at the table, for recognition, for care, and yet it's always the same narrative, fighting for something that should have been given from the start. The system is broken, and it's leaving behind the very people it was meant to protect. A particularly striking story you find is about another female veteran who's fighting for better mental health care. She spent months in and out of the VA hospital, trying to access the very services that should be available to her from day one. Her journey mirrors yours. One of frustration, exhaustion, and a deep sense of betrayal. How is it possible that after everything you've done, you still have to fight for the basic respect and care you deserve? You think of the many other women who are still out there, living in the shadows of a system that doesn't value them. Every day, they wake up, lace their boots, and get ready to face a world that doesn't see them for who they truly are. Heroes. You wonder if anyone will ever truly understand. But as much as the world may ignore the sacrifices of female veterans, there's a community of women who refuse to remain silent. Slowly but surely, the stories are being told, the voices are being heard. Social media, blogs, and podcasts are all becoming platforms for these women to share their experiences, to remind the world that they are more than the stereotypes imposed upon them. Veterans still argue over the way the system treats women in uniform. Some believe the issue is systemic, rooted in long-standing biases against women in the military, while others point to a lack of awareness and resources. But no matter where the blame lies, the reality remains the same. Female veterans are being neglected. They fight not only for their country, but for a place in a world that often seems to forget them the moment they leave service. You realize now that the silence you've been living in is not just your own. It's shared by many. And that's when you start to wonder, what if you could change that? What if, instead of accepting the silence, you could raise your voice to create the change you've been waiting for? You're standing at a crossroads, not sure which way to turn. You've been fighting battles for so long, but it feels like the real fight has always been against an indifferent system. The one that promised support but left you standing alone in the dark. The one that had you signing papers, pledging allegiance to a cause, but didn't explain the kind of sacrifice you'd be expected to make when you got home. And now, as you look back on the promises, you can see that you've been forgotten. What happens when a woman comes back from war, physically intact but emotionally shattered, only to find that the world doesn't know how to treat her? What happens when the country you fought for turns a blind eye to the sacrifices you've made? The answer, unfortunately, is all too clear. You're left fighting an entirely new battle, one you never anticipated, one that has nothing to do with weapons or enemies, but everything to do with the treatment you receive from the very system you swore to protect. The VA system, meant to be a sanctuary for those who have served, has become a battleground in itself. You've heard the horror stories from other female veterans. Long waits, bureaucratic hurdles, medical neglect. And while the VA is often praised for the care it provides to male veterans, the women who fought for the same freedoms find themselves caught in an endless loop of neglect. You've spent hours on the phone, only to be told to call back later or wait for a response. You've sat in waiting rooms that are overcrowded, surrounded by other vets who are equally frustrated, and all the while, you can't help but feel like your gender is the reason for your mistreatment. Veterans Affairs has made strides over the years to address gender-specific issues, but it's a slow process. Many female veterans still don't receive the specialized care they need, whether it's for physical injuries or mental health challenges. Female veterans are more likely to experience PTSD, sexual trauma, and chronic pain, yet the system fails to address these needs adequately. You remember hearing from one veteran, a woman who served in Iraq, who spoke out about how the system failed her after she was diagnosed with PTSD. She was told to toughen up and deal with it, as though her experiences weren't valid simply because she was a woman. It's a maddening cycle, one where the system, which is supposed to serve you, instead makes you feel like you're constantly fighting against it. You've heard veterans share their frustration on social media, some wondering if they'll ever receive the help they need, others asking if they should even bother trying to get treatment at all. And still, some are brave enough to speak up, even when they know their voices may be ignored. These veterans continue to share their stories, and in doing so, they create a space for others to come forward too. Slowly but surely, it's becoming clear that there is power in numbers. But it's not enough. Not yet. You think of how many veterans, especially female veterans, are still not speaking out. How many are afraid to admit that they're struggling because the world expects them to suck it up and move on? The same world that turns a blind eye to the mental health crisis plaguing many veterans, especially women, who face different challenges than their male counterparts. The stigma surrounding mental health care, especially for women who've served, is still far too strong. You read an article recently about a woman who'd been homeless for years after leaving the military. Her story was heartbreaking. She had served overseas in Afghanistan, only to come back to a country that had forgotten her. She was discharged and left to fend for herself, struggling with post-traumatic stress and facing a society that didn't know how to handle her needs. She ended up living on the streets for months, the system failing her at every turn. It wasn't until a local charity reached out to her that she began to receive help. And even then, it was only because someone noticed her and took action. Without that support, she would have remained invisible, just another statistic of a system that failed to protect her. Her story isn't unique. Female veterans like her are everywhere, all around the country, silently enduring the consequences of being forgotten. They're out there, on the streets, in hospitals, in their homes, waiting for a system that doesn't know how to address their unique struggles. The fight for recognition is far from over, but in the midst of this chaos, something is shifting. Slowly but surely, the voices of women veterans are rising. They're sharing their stories, creating a ripple effect that reaches across the nation. The stories aren't just about struggle, they're also about resilience, about strength, and about the courage to keep fighting, even when the odds seem impossible. The more women speak up, the more the truth comes into focus. Female veterans are not the exception. They are an integral part of the veteran community, and their sacrifices matter just as much as anyone else's. And still, you wonder, how long will it take for the world to wake up to this truth? How long will it take for the system to change, for female veterans to be given the care and recognition they deserve? Will it take another generation of women to come forward before the system is finally forced to listen? There comes a moment when you realize something deeper is at stake. It's not just about getting the help you need. It's about something bigger. It's about dignity, the right to be seen and recognized for who you are, not as a statistic or a charity case, but as a person who has served, sacrificed, and earned the right to be heard. And as you sit in the quiet aftermath of those long, lonely days, where the world around you is oblivious to your pain, a new fight begins to take shape. You refuse to let your service, your sacrifice, fade into the shadows of a world that isn't paying attention. The stories of female veterans are now starting to surface, but they don't just speak of struggle, they speak of rising above. There's a raw strength in them, a determination to redefine what it means to be a woman who has served. Some of the bravest voices you've heard lately belong to women who have fought for recognition, not just within the system, but in the eyes of their fellow citizens. These women have become warriors once again, but this time their battlefield isn't a foreign land. It's a nation that doesn't know how to embrace their power, their sacrifice. You've read the stories. Some are filled with hope, others with tears of frustration. One particular woman, an army veteran who served multiple deployments overseas, has recently turned her pain into a mission. She founded an advocacy group for female veterans, a place where women who have served can find support and recognition. Her own journey wasn't easy. She was overlooked for promotions simply because of her gender, a challenge that left her feeling invisible among her peers. But instead of retreating into the silence that so many others have faced, she stepped forward, using her voice to raise awareness of the issues that female veterans face. Her advocacy work focuses on several core issues: healthcare, mental health, career transitions, and equal treatment. She's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for the women who are still out there, hidden in plain sight. She says, "I was lucky to find my voice, but what about the women who don't have the resources? What about the ones still waiting for someone to notice them?" Her organization has grown rapidly, serving hundreds of female veterans who share similar stories of being overlooked and neglected by a system that should have had their backs from the very beginning. But not everyone sees this shift. There are still those who question the need for specialized care for women veterans. They argue that all veterans should be treated the same. It's a sentiment you've heard far too many times. But the reality is, women veterans have different needs that the system has long neglected. These aren't just physical needs, they are emotional, psychological, and social. A woman who has been through combat or served in war zones faces unique challenges, from military sexual trauma to the difficulty of reintegrating into a world that didn't know how to treat her. Yet these challenges often get brushed aside, dismissed as mere inconveniences rather than critical issues that demand attention. The push for a more inclusive approach is gaining traction, but it's a slow process. The VA is starting to recognize these unique needs, but the change is incremental. You think about the time it will take before real reform happens and wonder if it will come soon enough for those who are still struggling. After all, each passing day, each forgotten woman veteran, adds another layer to the mountain of unacknowledged sacrifice. And you start to wonder, what does it take to change the status quo? How many more voices must rise before the world finally listens? The fight is far from over, but with each voice that speaks out, with each story that breaks through the silence, the momentum is growing. Slowly but surely, the tide is turning. The silent whispers are becoming roars. There's another woman, a veteran you recently read about, who experienced a complete shift in her life after she found a sense of community. She had been homeless for years, struggling to get by on the streets. But everything changed when a local veterans organization reached out to her. They offered her housing, job training, and, perhaps most importantly, a place where she could find other women who had walked similar paths. For the first time, she didn't feel alone, and as she shared her story, she became a beacon for others, proving that even the most invisible can be seen again if they are given the support they need. Her story was a reminder that change is possible, even when the odds seem stacked against you. It's proof that communities can rebuild what the system failed to offer. And yet, there are still so many women who aren't lucky enough to find that kind of support. You know, it takes more than just one success story to turn the tide. It takes a collective effort, a movement of women who won't stay silent, who will keep fighting until they get what they deserve. But what happens when the system, as broken as it may be, finally starts to listen? It won't be immediate. It will take time, patience, and persistence. But in the long run, the changes will be seismic. The recognition, the care, and the respect will no longer be optional. They will be a fundamental part of what it means to serve, to sacrifice, and to be honored as a veteran. No longer will the silent veterans remain in the shadows. You can't help but feel a flicker of hope as you think about this. Because even if the world hasn't fully woken up yet, there's a sense of power in knowing that you are not alone. The collective voices of women veterans are rising, and with them, a new future is beginning to take shape, one where your dreams are no longer dismissed, but embraced. You feel a shift, a new energy that rises from deep within. It's not just about you anymore. It's about the women who stand with you, who share your scars, your struggles, and your relentless desire for recognition. It's about them, and it's about the future you all want to create for the generations that come after you. You realize that the fight isn't just personal, it's collective. The voices of female veterans are growing louder, and with each story shared, with each testimony that pierces the silence, the fight becomes more powerful. But as you continue to navigate through this complicated terrain, you realize that change comes slowly. It's a marathon, not a sprint. For years, female veterans have been sidelined, overlooked, and underestimated. The system has failed them at nearly every turn, and for so long, they were forced to navigate a world that wasn't built for them. Women who served in combat zones returned home to face challenges far greater than the ones they faced overseas. They came back to a world that didn't know how to welcome them, a system that didn't understand them, and a society that didn't appreciate the complexities of their experiences. Their struggles, both physical and emotional, were too often brushed aside, and their voices were drowned out by a collective ignorance about what it truly meant to be a female veteran. Yet, despite all of this, there's an undeniable spark that won't be extinguished. The stories of women rising above these odds are becoming more prevalent. You think of the female veterans who have fought for the rights of others, who have taken their pain and turned it into a mission for change. They've become advocates, mentors and leaders, pushing for the reforms that are so desperately needed. They refuse to accept the system as it is. They're determined to reshape it. You recently read about a former Navy veteran who, after years of struggling with PTSD and the aftermath of military sexual trauma, decided to speak out about her experiences. She found her voice in the most unexpected way, through social media. Her post went viral, and it opened up a floodgate of stories from other women who had endured the same thing. It wasn't easy for her. There was backlash, criticism, and even ridicule. But she didn't back down. She knew that her pain, her experiences, were valid and worthy of being heard. And as her story spread, it sparked a much-needed conversation about the sexual assault epidemic within the military and the need for systemic change. The impact of this shift was profound. More women began to speak out about their experiences, and the public's awareness of the challenges female veterans face grew. They started demanding the attention, care, and support they deserved. Female veterans became a focal point in a broader discussion about how to address the needs of all veterans. The conversation shifted from the idea that veterans were just men who fought in wars to the understanding that women, too, had sacrificed and endured. You wonder if this is the beginning of the end of the silence. Perhaps the change won't happen in one fell swoop, but it's happening. You see it in the headlines, in the social media posts, and in the advocacy groups that are forming. More and more women are coming together, sharing their stories, and demanding what's rightfully theirs. They're challenging the status quo and redefining what it means to be a female veteran in a world that's long ignored them. But even as these women fight for their rightful place, you're reminded that there are still so many who are struggling in silence. They don't have the platform, the resources, or the support to speak up. They remain invisible, lost in the cracks of a broken system that doesn't know how to help them. The veteran community as a whole has often been criticized for its failure to address the specific needs of women who have served. But there are also stories of hope that shine through the darkness. You remember reading about a woman who had been homeless for years after leaving the military. She had served in the Air Force, deployed in a combat zone, and returned to a world that didn't know how to help her. She was left without the support she needed, and she ended up living on the streets. But one day, a community outreach program took notice of her and helped her get back on her feet. With the support of fellow veterans, she was able to find housing, receive the mental health care she needed, and regain a sense of purpose. Her story was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. There are people who care, people who are willing to stand by you, and people who are fighting for change. Her journey is not unique. For every woman who finds a lifeline, there are countless others still struggling, still waiting for someone to notice. But these stories are vital. They prove that change is possible, even in a system that seems to be designed to keep you invisible. With each story of recovery, with each woman who finds her voice, the narrative shifts. These women are no longer the forgotten veterans. They are the ones leading the charge for the future of female veterans everywhere. And as you sit here reflecting on all that has come before, you realize that the fight for recognition is not over. It's far from over. It's just beginning. The truth is finally coming to light, and it's powerful enough to change everything. Women veterans are no longer the silent few. They are the ones who will carry the torch forward, fighting for the rights, dignity, and respect they've long been denied. And as long as they continue to rise, as long as their voices continue to be heard, there is hope for change. There's a moment in every struggle when you pause and realize just how far you've come. You look back and see the battles that have shaped you physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And in that moment, the weight of everything you've endured starts to settle into its rightful place. The frustration, the exhaustion, the loneliness, it all seems to fade into a singular understanding. You've survived. You've fought, you've risen, and you've proven that your service matters, even if the world was too blind to see it before. But that moment doesn't come without a price. It never does. Every victory is tempered by the scars left behind, the gaps that have yet to be filled, the systems that still fail those who served. You can feel it in your bones. The world has moved on, but the battle for recognition isn't over. There are still too many veterans, too many women, whose voices remain silent, whose sacrifices go unnoticed. And as much as the world may have forgotten, you know that the fight is far from over. You think back to everything you've learned over these long years. The first taste of the struggle came early on, in the first moments when you stepped into the uniform. The questions, the doubts, the mockery. It all started then, didn't it? It was the look in their eyes when you told them you were enlisting, the disbelief that a woman would want to put herself in harm's way. But you knew then that it was about more than just service. It was about proving something, not to anyone else, but to yourself. You were capable. You were strong. You were more than what they thought you were. And you were determined to make them see it. But the fight didn't stop there. You learned quickly that the challenges didn't end when you returned home. No, in many ways they intensified. The system that was supposed to offer support and care instead became another battlefield. You've spent more time fighting bureaucracy than you ever did with a weapon in hand. But through it all, you've come to realize something profound. This fight isn't just about the recognition you deserve. It's about the future of every woman who has served, and every woman who will. It's about ensuring that they don't have to endure the same struggles, the same silencing, the same erasure that you've experienced. You see, what you've been through has laid the groundwork for the change that is coming. It's not about waiting for someone else to make the first move. It's about understanding that the change has already started, and it's rising from the very people who've been overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten. The strength of women veterans has always been there, even when no one else saw it. And now, as their voices begin to echo louder and stronger, it's clear that the future will be different. Perhaps the most heartbreaking realization is that this fight is not unique to you. It's a fight that so many others are fighting too. Every day, female veterans wake up and face a world that doesn't fully understand them, doesn't fully appreciate the depth of their sacrifice. But the more the truth is shared, the more the world is forced to confront it. The more stories that are told, the more the silence starts to crumble. It's not an instant transformation. It's slow, painstaking work, but it's happening. The stories of female veterans are becoming more prominent in the media, on social platforms, and in legislative halls. What was once considered a fringe issue is now at the forefront of discussions about veterans' rights and care. And while it's far from perfect, the acknowledgement of the unique challenges that female veterans face is beginning to take shape. Your battle, your fight, is not just for you. It's for those who are still out there, struggling in silence, waiting for someone to hear them. You think back to the women who have come before you, those whose sacrifices were made in the shadows, their stories left untold. There was no celebration of their service, no recognition for their strength. But with each step forward, you realize that they are finally being seen. The injustice of their erasure is being corrected, slowly but surely. And now you know that your voice and the voices of countless others are what will push this change forward. There's a sense of camaraderie that comes with this realization. You are not alone. Your experiences are shared by thousands of women who served this country with the same strength and resilience you did. The isolation you once felt is slowly fading, replaced by a solidarity that is both empowering and humbling. You can feel the power in the collective action of women who are no longer willing to stay silent. Their stories, their struggles, their triumphs, these are the stories that will shape the future of female veterans for generations to come. The road ahead is still uncertain. The challenges you face are far from over, but you no longer feel the weight of those challenges bearing down on you as you once did. Instead, you feel a renewed sense of purpose, a sense of hope. You understand now that the fight is not just for acknowledgement, but for the respect and care that all veterans, regardless of gender, deserve. The work isn't finished, but it's begun in earnest, and it's led by women who refuse to be forgotten. And as you continue forward, you hold on to one simple truth: the future will be different. It will be different because of the brave women who are willing to speak up, who are willing to fight, and who are willing to change the course of history for those who come after them. You've paved the way. You've fought the hardest battle of all, the battle to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. And now, as the dust settles and the silence fades, you realize that the world may not have been ready for you before, but it will be ready for the women who follow in your footsteps. It's not about waiting for recognition. It's about demanding it, not just for yourself, but for every woman who has ever served this country. You've earned it, and now so will they.